I tend to categorize anything absurd, from the runaround IU administration is giving me over immunization compliance to the amount of noise my kids make every time I try to record the speech, as ridiculosity. It's a word I made up pretty much by accident, but it helps me to laugh off the bedlam that's going on around me. Or freck. That's what happens to my best friend when she sits out in the sunshine too long. She frecks. Do you guys ever make up your own words? Why shouldn't we? William Shakespeare did it all the time. According to Dr. Ernest Klein, the bard coined or first used hundreds of words. Eventful, domineer, laughable, gnarled, dauntless. Words we still use today. But what happened to words like deliciate, kench, or brabble? I ask you, is our vocabulary shrinking? And what does that mean for modern communication? Why is vocabulary important anyway? On an individual level, it correlates with academic success. Studies have shown that as early as 16 months old, the vocabulary of a child can predict its 6th grade reading and math scores. But the end game is that we use it to convey our thoughts clearly. Listen to how articulate these passages by Jane Austen are. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. Pride and Prejudice. A man who has nothing to do with his own time has no conscience in intruding on that of others. Sense and Sensibility. She had a lively, playful disposition that delighted in anything ridiculous. Pride and Prejudice. I feel like I'd recognize these characters anywhere. Why don't people talk like this anymore? What's happened to our vocabulary? I've heard the cyber rumor of our modern word count being at about 10,000, where it had been more than twice that in our parents' generation. But I couldn't actually find the source. I found several unsubstantiated statistics that were pretty disheartening. And then an ongoing online research program published by Frontiers in Psychology that seems to think we're far ahead of that game at about 42,000 dictionary words. Just for fun, I found this graph that data scientist Matt Daniels made. He took the first 35,000 lyrics of rappers and graphed the amount of unique words they used. And for reference, he did the same with William Shakespeare and Herman Melville. Check it out. The results found William and Herman ahead of most of the pack, but not actually in the lead. Finally, I found an academic journal article called Vocabulary Size Revisited, the link between vocabulary size and academic achievement. And it addressed the real problem that all of these studies counted their words differently. What they did conclude, though, whether someone counts actual words or word families, spoken or written, was that most incoming college students are just below or at the cusp of the vocabulary size that they need to understand university-level texts, and this starts them off at a disadvantage. So what's changed? Is it technology's fault? In a book called The Village Effect, researching psychologist Susan Pinker takes a look at the effects of the one laptop per child program that our country implemented over a decade ago. Her studies and the other studies she cites in her book show that when we computerized our classrooms, most test scores actually dropped or at best stalled out. Technology does not seem to be making us any smarter, and our vocabulary seems to be shrinking, unless we include all the LOLs and BRBs. But technology can help with communication. Biographer Elaine Bander likened Jane Austen's letters to using social media, because Jane used life's everyday events as her source material to be transformed into clever sentences, selecting details and sharpening syntax for her status updates, much like we would today. So, in conclusion, does size really matter? Elaine Bander reminds us that in an age where we have Google Image or memes or television adaptations, only a few years ago, people only had words as their primary medium to process life's events and to communicate them with other people. We don't have the vocabulary that they had, but we have advances that might actually give us the edge in communication. Because, as we learned from Richard Green's TED Talk, Words are only a tiny fraction of communicating a bigger idea. Thanks.